Welcome back, Cougars. So in this video, we are going to take the data that we charted in video 1 of this series and use it to create a scatter plot like the one that you see on the screen. Let's review what we did in the first video. So we started by opening up Google Sheets, creating a sheet with the plunger height and trials for our rocket data. Then we inputted a formula, I don't think that's a word, let's try input. Then we input a formula for our average, and we set it to average all of the different trials we have at each plunger height. We're going to use the graphing feature of Google Sheets to then take our plunger heights and put them on our x-axis, and put the distance that our rocket traveled on the y-axis. So when we look at this chart, we see at plunger height 2, these are the different distances that our rocket traveled. Plunger height 3, these are the different distances that our rocket traveled, and so forth. Once we've entered all of this data, we're going to use a mathematical tool called a trend line. And the trend line looks at all the data we have and calculates the best path through all the data. You can think of it sort of as an average. And using this trend line, we can predict how our rocket's going to fly at different plunger heights. So for example, if we set our plunger height at 8, if we set our plunger height at about, here's 2.5, 2 3/4, then our rocket would travel about 9. So if you had a target at 9 feet, you would need to set your plunger height to about 2 3/4. We'll talk more about that later in class. For right now, let's build a graph based on our data. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up the data that we created during the first video. We're then going to highlight all of it. So we're going to click, hold, and drag across all of this data, and we're going to click the graph. Here it is, the graph button. It says Insert Chart. So the computer is going to look at this data, and it is going to guess what it thinks is the best chart for us. So it thinks a column chart would be the best for us, but I think you can see that this is going to be a little crazy. So over on the right side in our chart editor, we're going to click on the drop-down menu that lets us choose the type of graph. And let's see what some of them do. If we click a line graph, again, it doesn't seem to give us very good information. We've looked at a chart graph, bar graph, or sometimes called a column graph. Pie graph, definitely not helping us there. What we want to use is called the scatter chart, or the scatter plot. And that's going to get our data in a nice, organized series for us so that we can use it to make predictions, make analysis of what we have. All right, so for the next 5 minutes or so of the video, we're going to work through all of the setup and the customization to get this chart the way that we want it. The first thing we need to consider is the data range. And the data range tells the computer what information we want. If you notice here, it starts at A1 and it goes to L6. So let's go back into our data, find L6, that's this cell here, up to A1. A1 to L6, you see that this has all of the data that we created. That's the data range we want. All right, so I'm going to double click on the chart again and open back up the settings. That is the correct for us. If for some reason yours is wrong, click on this box, move this out of the way, click, hold, and drag across all of it, and it'll fill it in for you. All right. For our series, we should have series trial 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the average. All right. So let's go back in and add a series. Oops, guys, sorry about the glitch there. I had phone ring and needed to go back and answer that. So let's go back into what we were talking about. You'll notice that on mine it's only showing trial 1 through trial 6. Yet, on our chart, we set up all the way through trial 10. The reason it's only showing through trial 6 is that there's no data for trial 7, 8, 9, and 10. If we had data here, then the computer would automatically fill it on our chart, and it would show up here under our series. Right. Finally, as we move down, we want to click, where you can see it better, we want to click Use Column A as Labels. And so you'll notice when we cut that off, we have no labels. When we cut that on, we get our labels. All right, that's everything we're going to do under the Setup tab. Now let's go over to the Customize tab and let's set a few things up. First one we're going to do is the chart title. So we're going to click on the drop down, make sure we have chart title selected, and in this title text box we're going to name it Plunger Height versus Distance. So Plunger Height versus Distance Traveled is going to be the name of our chart title. Let's go ahead and name our X and Y axis. So we're going to go to our vertical axis and we're going to name that distance. Let's go to our horizontal axis. This is our X axis and we're going to name this plunger height. And now you can see we have our title on our chart, on our graph. We have distance for our y-axis and plunger height. And actually we should probably go back and put units. So let's put feet, distance in feet for our y-axis and plunger height for our x-axis, our horizontal axis. All right, we're done with the chart and title.
Good morning.
The next part of our customization we're going to work on are our series. And we can select specific series to add information to, or we can add information to all of them. If we select all and then put on our trend line, we're going to get a lot of different trend lines, and this is going to be very confusing for us. So what we're going to do instead is we're just going to put our trend line for the average. So under the series, drop down box, go to average, scroll down and click on the button that says trend line. And we're going to get one trend line through all of them. If you want to, you can change its color, make it more visible. You can make it thicker. There's lots of different things you can do here. But those are all up to you. I wouldn't make it crazy thick. It's going to be hard to get good data on it. And you can label it if you want to. You don't need to. So again, choosing average, adding the trend line, and that's all we're going to do under the series drop down. All right, let's go to the legend drop down. This is the legend over here. For purposes of this chart, we don't need one. So we're going to go under position where it says auto, and we're going to choose none. And that just opens up more space for our chart, makes it a little cleaner. Under horizontal axis, we drop down with horizontal axis. If you wanted to, you could change the font, the color, the size, all kinds of information you can do here. There's nothing we need to do. Let's open vertical axis. Again, for the vertical axis, for the y-axis, there's all kinds of things we can add here, but there's nothing we need to do. We do need to add under grid lines and ticks. All right, so we're going to select the vertical axis. And what we want to do is we want to add one line for each number going across. And we're going to put it in terms of steps, and we're going to give it a step value. Now, common sense would say that between 0 and 5, we would need 5 steps. Oops, not playing nice. What's it doing? I think I just accidentally clicked on something. What's it? Not playing nice for some reason. Okay, so the vertical axis. See, we just lost our line here. Let's start. Let's go back to horizontal axis. Steps. All right, now it's just being silly. What is it doing? All right, so it's not playing nice at this moment. This is all for the horizontal major grid lines. Okay, let's go back to the vertical now. Okay, here we are. So for the vertical axis, we need to turn on our grid lines. So we're going to click on major grid lines. We're going to click on minor grid lines, and this fills all these in. There we go. That's what the problem was. Now, for the major grid lines, it asks what count. And if you notice here, there are only 2 ticks between 0 and 5. Well, we just want 1. All right, so right now we got 2. Let's add in our minors. Okay, so following along here, we've got under major spacing type, count, auto. Under minor spacing type, count 5. So as I was mentioning a minute ago, we would think that there would be 5 spaces between 0 and 5. But if we count them together, we'll see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then this one would be 6. These aren't spaced properly for what we want. So we want to change this to 4. And this gives us the proper amount of spacing. So 0, 1, 2, 3. I think we didn't pick it up. We didn't change it over here. I'm going to cut them off and cut them back on and see if that fixes it. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so what I had to do was cut minor off and cut it back on. Some reason for it to change it. I think it's just an issue with the internet today, not wanting to refresh as quick as it should. All right, so let's review this. Major grid lines ticked, minor grid lines ticked, and the check boxes here. Major spacing set to count and auto, minor spacing set to count and 4, and this gives us the right number of lines. All right, 2 more things we're going to do here. First, we're going to hit the drop-down menu, and we are going to move, so the 3 boxes here, the 3 circles here, we're going to move this to its own sheet, and it's going to show up down here. So let's name, these are 2 tabs, we can jump back and forth. And in spreadsheets, we call these sheets. So I'm going to right-click on it and do rename, and I'm going to name. And then I'm going to right-click and do rename, and name this one graph. I'm going to make sure that I named my file, first name, last name, rocket data, and we are all done. We now have all of our data entered, we have our graph made, and you would be ready to submit this and be ready to use this in order to predict data for the rockets.